I am the Assistant Director of the Counseling Center on the Armstrong campus, and I will be the facilitator for this panel discussion. So we just really want to talk about suicide on college campus. So some information is that suicide among college students is a growing problem. In fact, it's now the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 43 in the United States. We know suicide prevention and education must be a priority in our community. By participating in open dialogue with our campus community, we are aiming to reduce stigma surrounding suicide and mental illness. The goal of this panel is to raise awareness, spread information about suicide prevention, and to share mental health resources that are accessible to students. The panel will feature different health professional staff working at Georgia Southern. I do want to let you know that some of the content being discussed can be triggering. If you feel triggered by the information presented, I would encourage you to speak to someone. We have resources on campus and in our community that can help offer support. You can also reach out to someone at the University Counseling Center as we offer after-hours crisis counseling. We've also included a number of resources in the chat box if you need to utilize those for support and/or safety. So those resources will be shared pretty soon, and they'll come up so that you'll be able to see them once they put those in the chat box. We do have some questions prepared for our panelists, but do have some time set aside for anyone to ask questions in the chat section of this link. So we will be giving directions at the end of this event on how you can get attendance verification for attending this event. So now I would like to ask all the panelists, can you each please give an introduction, tell us who you are and your role at Georgia Southern, and I'll tell each of you who to go so we don't talk all over each other. So Dr. Caldwell, if you can please go first.
Good evening, I'm Jody Caldwell. I'm the Executive Director at the Counseling Center and a psychologist.
Nikita.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nikita Robinson. I'm the case manager and mental health counselor at the Statesboro campus at Georgia Southern, and I also serve as the suicide prevention coordinator.
Jeannie.
Hi, I'm Jeannie McGowan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the director of counseling on the Armstrong campus of Georgia Southern.
Gemma.
Hi, y'all. I'm Dr. Gemma Skirta. I'm the director of student wellness and health promotion for Georgia Southern.
And Amanda.
Hi, and my name is Amanda Court. I'm also a mental health counselor at the Counseling Center on the Armstrong campus, as well as the suicide coordinator for the Armstrong campus.
Thank you. So we have some questions prepared for the panelists. And so I'm going to ask a question, then the panelists will share their answer. And then when we're done with the questions, the moderated questions, we'll open it up to anybody else that might have some questions. So September is Suicide Awareness Month. Can you talk about what might contribute thinking about suicide? Is it only experienced by those with a mental health problem? And how common is suicidal thinking within the college population?
Sure. So suicidal ideation, or considering or thinking about suicide, is actually very common, both in the general population and particularly among college students. Research kind of varies, but a conservative estimate is that 1 in 5, or about 20% of college students, experience serious suicidal ideation. So the factors that contribute to thinking about suicide are pretty much endless and as unique as people are themselves. But there are definitely some risk factors that we know can increase the likelihood that someone might consider suicide. And while those risk factors do include a history of previous mental health distress, particularly depression or trauma, they're certainly not limited to that. So some of the other common risk factors for suicidal ideation are experiencing a chronic illness, having a sense of hopelessness, like things are never going to get better, or they're in a situation where they're never going to be able to get out of that situation. Using a lot of substances, feeling isolated or lonely, actually losing a loved one to a suicide, particularly if that loved one had been a family member. And even just having a fear of asking for help, or maybe not knowing that there is help out there to be asked for. So what's really critical is knowing that first, no one of these risk factors or combination can predict who may be considering suicide, but being kind of tuned into what the risk factors are and being comfortable and getting comfortable with asking people when we're concerned that they may be considering suicide. So by talking and starting to have dialogues where we can talk openly about suicide, we can communicate to each other that having thoughts of suicide is not at all uncommon, and that there are resources out there to help us in ways to get past those thoughts of suicide.
Thank you. The second question is the BIPOC community, and that's the Black, Indigenous, people of color community, is an incredibly diverse population, including people from various cultures, racial, and ethnic backgrounds, which makes it difficult to speak about BIPOC collectively. Based on your research and work in multiculturalism, can you speak to some of the struggles faced by various groups within the BIPOC community? What are some of the challenges, misconceptions, and how might we combat those within the BIPOC communities?
Sure. So this is a wonderful question, and it has so many different angles. Based on my own research and experience, I want to focus specifically on a particular challenge of BIPOC, which is access to quality mental health services. Minority groups typically have less overall wealth and resources to initiate connecting with services that are available. So while access to services may be thought of as one challenge, the dynamics are complex in that additional barriers like transportation, childcare, racism and discrimination, and language barriers all lead to a decline in seeking services. Additionally, there are limitations of the quality of services they might be receiving and the availability of these services, as this group may need access beyond traditional work hours of 9 to 5. More importantly, there may be less money available beyond basic needs like food, shelter, and clothing. So mental health needs drop a little further down the list when overall resources are low. Even when insurance is available, copays and high deductibles can still stop the pursuit of services because they're not able to afford the costs. Additional stigma within the BIPOC communities may further discourage mental health services because people don't want to lose their jobs or relationships due to being thought crazy or weak. With common misconceptions, BIPOC are thought to be more resilient and strong and not having the experience of common mental health issues like suicidal thoughts or depression. But in reality, marginalized groups, especially whether due to race, gender, or ability, are more likely to experience risk factors like discrimination, ongoing trauma of racism, or homophobia that can lead to mental health disorders. Research actually shows that marginalized groups report experiencing higher levels of depression than those of majority groups. To combat these disparities in mental health services for BIPOC, we have to create space for those with lived experiences that are different than our own. It may be difficult to recognize what others may be experiencing if it has not been your own experience. We can continue to lobby for equal rights to resources like healthcare, fair wages, and holding providers accountable for ensuring up-to-date training to work within marginalized groups. Lastly, we can make ourselves more aware of the resources that are available and acknowledge the needs of this group so that we can connect them to the best available resources.
Thank you. Like I said, that population to me is, I see in my heart. So I just know that I've spoken with lots of students from this population, different populations. I guess I didn't want to say population, I mean BIPOC, and students who identify with gender, sexual orientation. They feel like they're not accepted always by their family or their culture, and so they then internalize things. And so getting the word out there, and I think having more visibility really helps them feel like somebody cares or they're connected. So thank you, Nikita, for sharing that. The next question is, what resources and services are available to students that may be struggling with their well-being or even thinking about suicide? What are some of the barriers and misconceptions to accessing these resources and services?
Sure, thank you for that question. So I'm going to focus on the resources that are readily available to students on the Georgia Southern campus. I'm going to first begin with case management, because case management is really, and Nikita is one of our case managers who's been doing this work for a very long time, and along with Tatiana Smith on the Armstrong campus, and they really work so hard to compile so many resources across so many different areas for students and our entire community. So finding mental health resources, what's available, individual providers, facilities that might be of interest for specific things like substance abuse or a psychiatric facility. They work hard to update those lists and keep that information really at our fingertips in the counseling center, but really for the entire Georgia Southern community. So I wanted to lead off with that because that's an important aspect. If you are a student, I'm going to get to those services in a second, but some of you might be staff or faculty. And staff and faculty, are also people that fall within this. Anybody can experience some suicidal thought, can be impacted by suicide. So we really do have some great resources through our health insurance, through our EAP services that are available that we really encourage faculty and staff to take advantage of when these situations arise for them. For students, there are so many things that are coming out of the counseling office. Your team of counselors is working endlessly to provide so many resources. In terms of clinical resources, we offer the traditional individual service. We have relational counseling, which is couples counseling, and a really strong group therapy program. And group therapy is such a great resource for students where we're focusing on one treatment issue, and there's a collective group of students working on that issue and can bond and share and grow from that treatment. Additionally to that, some of the other more critical resources for people that are struggling are our same-day solution sessions, which are if you're in distress and you cannot wait for an appointment and our office is open, we offer shortened sessions to assess what your needs are, to provide some immediate resources, work through what those needs are, and provide immediate support. And those are available throughout the day on both campuses. In terms of crisis work, we also have our counselors do not stop when the 5 o'clock buzzer goes off. We have on-call counselors that are available to do crisis intervention work and support our community when a student is in distress nights and weekends. So we have counselors rotating through on-call on both the Armstrong campus and the Statesboro campus to support students in that way. And that's an easily accessed service. I know Amanda put some information in our chat box about the phone numbers. To contact an on-call counselor, all you need to do is contact one of the campuses, preferably the one that you associate with, and there's a voicemail prompt that will take you to the counselor on call. You can also access that through Resident Life. You can access resources and support through Resident Life or UPD. Past those traditional services that you would expect from a counseling center, we offer so many workshops for students. The list, I think there's about 10 different workshops that we offer, and those workshops are psychoeducational based or support based or a little bit of both. So we provide resources to students that are looking to build skills, but not looking to be in a counseling situation or may not need a counseling situation. So they're on your ability to drop in and use them as much or as little as you need. And they are all listed on our Counseling Center webpage. You'll also find on that webpage what we introduced in the fall of 2020 are our on-demand series. And so we have on-demand that you can access any time of the day or night, resources that are on, Gemma does one on mindful yoga. We have one that Becca has done on stress management. So there are some videos in there for you to access and look at when our office isn't open and you want to gain a little bit of skill and support around some of the issues that you might be facing as a student. Those are some of the more critical pieces of the work that we do. We also offer outreaches and things along those lines and go into the community to provide education and training. And I'll leave the training component to Amanda to talk a little bit about of how everybody can contribute on that end. In terms of outside of the counseling center, resources that are available, again, are in this chat box. Locally, we have what we call GCAL, which is a Georgia Crisis and Access Line, which is a mobile team that will come out and assess somebody having a mental health crisis. That phone number is 800-715-4225. We also have on the back of every student ID, and I believe this is still going on, is that National Suicide Prevention number. So every student, staff, faculty who carries their student ID with them has that suicide prevention number readily available. It's a national crisis line, a 1-800-784-2433 number that I would encourage you to just make sure you know where it is on your student ID. It's a little small for somebody like me who's got old eyes, but young people hopefully can see it. Another one from the JED Foundation is Lifeline, which they also do a text. So you can text the word START, all in capital letters, to 741-741, and you can engage in a text conversation to get some support. In terms of, and I think that's sort of, and there's tons more in the community that we can access, but I think case management has those in a really good bank that people can look at. In terms of barriers and misconceptions, I think Nikita did a really good job at sort of talking about the barriers for the Black, Indigenous, people of color population, because they're very similar. I think they're more intense within certain populations, but they're very similar barriers to accessing care. So, when I think about barriers, I think about some very logistical ones like access and availability. Can I get there? Do I have the funds to do that? Are the office hours open? Are there enough trained people to provide that service? Are there wait lists? So those are things that I think about when I think about, and we know in research become barriers to care. If these aren't available, people don't access the mental health treatment that they need. The other piece, which is a pretty critical piece that Nikita touched on as well, is stigma. So public stigma, which is how the people around us perceive mental health. We've seen some changes, I think, in this area where we are all talking more about mental health. There's more entertainment shows, there's more things that bring these topics forward to the general public, so more conversation is happening around mental health and suicide in particular. More often the battle isn't with public stigma, but it's more so with personal stigma. How I feel about accessing services. Am I weak? Am I going to be seen as crazy? Those kinds of things that we know become a challenge. It's okay for somebody else to get that. I support that, but for me, it has a whole other meaning. And that's a pretty difficult barrier. And some of the ways that I think is helpful is that to break through those barriers is when we do things like this on a panel, you get to meet 5 of the counseling staff who are out there doing work, and you can interact with us and see who we are and how we talk about mental health and get a sense as to who we are. And I always think the best way to break down some of those barriers is student to student. When students talk about using those services, it's helpful. When they're comfortable doing so, they promote and encourage other students to access those services. And then I would say, we work hard in the counseling center, and I know Gemma and the health and the student wellness center work very hard to develop our relationships with our campus partners. So our campus partners act as referrals and promote the services we provide, so that students are really accessing all that's available to help them to be students. I think I answered that and beyond.
Thank you, Jeannie. No, that was great, because there are so many resources, but yet so many people have mental or financial or practical barriers to receiving that help. And one thing I will say before we move on to the next question, I do have to say, for this generation, I'm just really proud that the stigma is breaking down, because I know my generation, it was like, I'm going to therapy, and you basically didn't want to tell anybody. And my students really are like, guess what my therapist said? And so are talking more about it. And I think that breaks it down, the stigma, and it gives other people hope that if you could go and get better, then maybe I can go and get better. So I'm very proud of this generation for being able to speak up and share more about the resources they're receiving. I just hope it will continue. Moving on to our next question. In addition to mental health services, what are some additional things students can do to take care of their overall well-being?
So that's a great question. And we definitely believe that suicide is preventable, and that mental health is something we all have. In society with stigma, we tend to connect mental health automatically with a negative connotation, instead of recognizing that mental health is a spectrum, and some manage their mental health more productively than others. But there are definitely things that you can do regarding self-care in order to contribute to your overall well-being. So some of the more basic ones are just taking care of your body in general, a healthy diet and physical activity. I am a big believer in finding the sport or finding your fitness in whatever way that speaks to you. I think that when we're growing up, we are boxed into soccer, track, football, and if we don't identify with one of those sports and it really wasn't for us, then we automatically think we don't like physical activity, when in fact you just may have not found the physical activity that works for you. When we teach mindful yoga, I remind everyone there that you can sit in child's pose for 60 minutes and you will have successfully done yoga for a whole hour. You may be an amazing roller derby person, but you've never been on roller skates, or cardio strip tees. That's a really fun group fitness class. Step out and try different things that are outside of the general physical activity. Healthy diet, just some tips that I think are really practical. You hear sometimes eat the rainbow. So what that means is eat a really colorful plate. The colors in food actually represent a vitamin or a mineral. So one that's really common is carotene. That's in orange foods like carrots, good for your eyesight. So that's a mineral that's really important to make sure you're getting in your diet. So if you look down at your plate and you see green spinach, pink salmon, purple eggplant, you know that you're getting a really well-balanced diet. And that's something that is an easy trick to, make a salad that's really colorful, and you're getting in a well-balanced diet. Develop a routine, and especially stay on that routine if you were in quarantine or isolation. It is very easy to fall into the trap of staying in your pajamas all day. And that kind of goes into the next tip that I have, which is staying socially. We may be socially distant, but we want to be emotionally connected. So even if you're in pajamas all day, have a set of daytime pajamas and a set of nighttime pajamas. Change, brush your teeth, take a shower each day. Just because you're staying home, continue to take care of yourself in those general ways. And hold yourself accountable. Use the video option. So that's a way to stay emotionally connected to the people that you might miss. And they can see you and you can see them. And sometimes, if I'm working from home, I would rather keep my video off, but sometimes I turn it on because I don't know if I'm talking to someone who needs to see me. So maybe reframe it that it's not for you, it's for the person you're talking to, and the person that misses you. Get plenty of rest. Your sleep schedule can really get thrown off, especially if you're in isolation or quarantine. The best recommendation I can give you, especially if you have classes that are at home, so you're home more often than you would be during a typical year, set up a workspace. Your bed, it should only be used for sexual activity and for sleep. If you're using it to eat in, if you're doing your homework there, if you're on your computer, you're psychologically going to start associating that space with other activities other than sleep, and it will make it more difficult to fall asleep. So better quality sleep. Limit your screen time. That can also impact your sleep schedule. Break up your schoolwork into smaller chunks. I always reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which essentially is a psychological theory that tells us we are in survival mode now in a pandemic. This is probably not the year to thrive. I hope that you are thriving as best as you can. We're all doing the best that we can. I think it's important to acknowledge this is hard and it's hard for everyone, but we want to make sure that your basic needs are met. And if you are doing that on a day-to-day basis, then you're doing what you need to in order to survive. Do activities that you enjoy. If that's reading, painting, drawing, journal. Daily gratitude list can go a long way, changing your perspective. And I'll also just add seek help. I think that that's the major message of this panel. Pain is real, but so is hope, and help's available to you. And we're glad you're here. We need you here. And continue to reach out, check on one another, because you're better with you here.
Thanks, Gemma. I think that's really helpful a reminder that focusing sometimes on your body helps your mental state, and doing little things every day can add up to big results. So I appreciate the feedback. Now our last question that we have before we'll open it up is suicide prevention work just done by mental health professionals? How can the community be part of this solution? And what do I do if I was worried about a friend or a loved one experiencing thoughts of suicide? Are there ways that I can help them?
So I'll break this up in a few different sections. Just the first part is suicide prevention work just done by mental health professionals. And one thing, although I think we're all here as mental health professionals, one message that I hope that I can give to you guys is that we all play a role in suicide prevention. Each of us have an opportunity to be the one person that can make a difference. The person who asks the question persuades them to get help and has resources to offer. We cannot predict death by suicide, but we can identify people who are at an increased risk for suicidal behaviors by knowing the signs, being present, and referring them for effective treatment. I think we all have a role in preventing suicide if we start to initiate those conversations, work to destigmatize mental health and even the help seeking, and offer help when you notice someone is struggling. And something that I'll talk a little bit later about is the training that we are encouraging and promoting for everybody, not just non-clinical staff, but like I said, everybody that can play a role in this can help somebody by asking those questions and offering resources. But to talk a little bit about community and how community can be part of the solution, I think communities play a critical role in suicide prevention. They provide social support to the vulnerable individuals and engage in follow-up care, raise awareness and support those impacted by suicide. They can help give individuals a sense of belonging and a feeling of connectedness. And again, kind of like what Gemma said, just that feeling of being connected to your campus, your community. Communities can also implement suicide prevention programming within community organizations. Facilitating those community engagement in suicide prevention is an important task. Something we are actively working towards is providing QPR training to everyone within Georgia Southern University campus and community. QPR is a great training, and I also added that link onto the chat if you guys would like to look at what this training is. This is a free training offered by our clinicians. We have several staff in our centers that are trained in QPR or QPR trainers. And this is a great training that offers the skills that we need to learn how to ask the question, are you thinking about suicide? How to persuade someone to get help, and how to offer resources. We've been able to offer this training not only to staff, students, and faculty, but within the community. We've offered this to school teachers, foster parents, youth advocates. Again, everybody in the community really does play a role in suicide prevention. Prevention involves educating the campus and community and increasing connectedness. And the last question to that is, what should I do if I was worried about a friend or a loved one experiencing thoughts of suicide? And are there ways I can help? With the QPR skills, I would encourage taking that action, asking that question, listening, be an active listener, be there for them, help them connect to resources. And we've already kind of helped you guys in the sense of providing those resources. I think that's a big piece. Is sometimes we're uncertain about asking the question because we don't know if what we're going to do if they say yes. So having the resources handy can help us when we are asking that question, because we have a follow-up response. We know people that we can point them to. We have resources that we can help them. And be proactive about showing that support. Keep lines of communication open. Even consider engaging in activities with them and encourage them to get and stay connected. One thing we always talk about too in QPR, again, I know that's learning the skills of how to ask the question, but if you're unable to ask the question, find someone who can. We do a lot of warm handoffs. We have friends that bring in concerned friends, or find someone who can ask the question. And I think that starts with just having those conversations with our friends, starting to break down those barriers of having those conversations. Offer resources and support. And lastly, take 5 minutes to check on someone that you may be worried about or may have been showing signs. It may mean more to them than you may know. So take that opportunity to reach out, send a quick text, just check on someone that you are worried about. And again, as we've listed some of those different resources, I know Jeannie touched on another one, on every Eagle ID is the suicide prevention hotline information, and maybe even just letting a friend or a concerned friend know that there are resources even available to them that they have access to. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. If everyone could just say one thing, if you guys could go around kind of in the order you just went, if you could say one thing about suicide prevention and finding strength to talk about it, to tear down the barriers that prevent us from being vulnerable and having these discussions, what would you say?
In terms of breaking down the barriers, I would say just ask. The thing I hear the most from when faculty or staff call to consult about students they're worried about is a concern that they don't want to be the first person to say the word suicide and to bring it up. So I always tell them, just put it out there. if you're thinking about it, this person has likely already thought about it. And so asking is only going to open the door for them to be able to get the help that they need.
I would definitely second what Dr. Caldwell said. One of the common questions that I hear is, what if they're mad at me? And that is a reality. Sometimes they may be upset because it may be embarrassing. It's something that may have been carrying for a really long time and they don't know how to unburden themselves with it. So asking can help lighten that load, can help open that door for them to really discuss what's going on. And I think some of the other barriers might just be feeling like they have this space to talk about those things because it is such a sensitive topic. It can really be really awkward or uncomfortable. So I just like to encourage people to have those awkward conversations and just know how much of a difference it can make for someone just to sit in a couple of seconds of discomfort and then really figure out how you're deepening that relationship and then problem solving with an individual who's in distress. Because when they're discussing their feelings, the biggest thing is just being heard, and that's providing so much help. And so just knowing that sometimes if you don't know what words to say, sometimes just being present and being open to hearing a person can be just as effective as any of the other tools of getting someone to resources. Because if you are listening and you're present, eventually that person's going to get what they need. And so just feeling comfortable with that discomfort and having those awkward conversations.
I would say, and I might have missed this opportunity to talk about a misconception, is that we are implanting the idea by asking about suicide. It is one of the, as Nikita said, it provides that space. If we introduce the topic of, are you thinking about suicide, in a manner that invites a conversation, it really allows that space to happen, and we're setting that tone, and it's not the responsibility of the person who's struggling. So I think that's such a critical piece, and it's not something that, if I tell you, it's a good idea to rob a bank, I don't think people are going to go out and rob a bank. We don't have that much influence. And so when we're talking about suicide, it really doesn't work that way. That if you're asking that question, it really provides that relief, like what Nikita and Jody are saying. So I think that's such a critical piece. The other thing, and I did see, Lindsay, I'm so sorry about your loss. I did see that in the chat box. I am, so Question Persuade Refer QPR is a suicide prevention training that we offer that can be done by lots of people. I am also trained as an assist trainer, which is a suicide intervention training. So it's a little bit more, it's a little bit of how to kind of keep involved with somebody who might have some suicidal ideation, thoughts, plans. And when I do those trainings, I've gone into the Georgia, throughout the state of Georgia. It's a 2-day training. What I've learned every single time is suicide has affected every single person I've come across. So Lindsay, you losing somebody to suicide, your sister, I've lost some friends. My brother has lost 3 friends to suicide. Those are things that when we open this door and we start talking about suicide, we know other people are impacted by this. And so it is so important to share that in that community, as Amanda talked about, in making our community safer, is that we're having those conversations, we're acknowledging it, and we're supporting one another in the surviving of having lost a family member. And so I have some resources on that, Lindsay, if you're interested in connecting with Prevent Suicide Today and some other family members who do these trainings that have lost children to suicide. So I would say those are my key pieces.
I definitely echo all that was already said by my colleagues. One other piece that I want to highlight is The idea that if you recommend therapy to someone, that it's all of a sudden negative connotation that they may be so messed up they need professional help. Reframe that for them and let them know that you think that they are worthy of an unbiased, safe, productive opportunity to process their experiences. And it doesn't need to be in the way of traditional talk therapy. You heard lots of resources available through the Counseling Center that isn't traditional talk therapy. Offer to go to a workshop with them, a virtual workshop. I'm going, hey, 4 o'clock yoga on Wednesday, mindful yoga. Here's the link, join me. That really goes a long way. And I think that if reminding the people that you care about or that you're worried about that they deserve to be here, they deserve to absorb light, breathe in oxygen, take up space exactly as they are, and that we need them here. That's always something really impactful to tell someone.
I'm going to piggyback right off of that. People can and do recover even from the darkest, most frightening places a mind can go. Even if you feel like giving up, hope is not lost, because hope and caring are meaningful gifts that we can give each other. And you're right, just checking in on somebody, having a date to go get coffee or do a workout together, taking time to connect with someone. I think that is very powerful and something we all can do to help somebody. And I think that can just make all the difference in the world if we reach out and offer that support and help to somebody.
Thank you to everyone. This discussion has offered a lot of different resources and information surrounding suicide prevention. I want to open this time up for anyone to ask questions of our panel members. If anything surprised you in our discussion today or how you feel you can use the information discussed. If anybody wants to unmute, you can share verbally or you can type something in the chat box and I can share it to the panelists.
Hey, I actually had a question, and I remember one of you said you were a psychologist, but I can't remember who because I couldn't look at my phone. But this question goes out to you, and my question was, is suicide always associated with mental illness? And if not, how should you approach someone that's of sound mind and has decided that suicide is something they want to pursue?
Sure. So way back at the beginning, I think that's one of the misconceptions people often have is that an individual has to have a mental health diagnosis or a mental health history to consider suicide. And that's not the case. We've talked a lot about different risk factors. I think, what it tends to boil down to is for whatever reason, a person is in a spot where they've lost hope that things can get better. And there's, any number of reasons that can happen. And not only have they lost the hope that things can get better, along with that, they don't feel like they have any other options. And so in terms of what we can do, if I remember the second part of your question, if you're concerned about somebody, this goes back to probably what you've heard. I would never hesitate to just let somebody know. It doesn't have to be somebody that you know well. It could be the person that, is on the virtual classroom with you and you see their face in the class. It could be somebody that you work with and you've just noticed a change in them. It is always okay to say, hey, I'm kind of worried about you. You seem like things have maybe changed for you, or I'm seeing things that worry me. Are you doing okay? Is there anything you need? Have you thought about suicide? Is that something that has been on your mind? Those kinds of questions, we get really uncomfortable as people asking. And yet for the person on the receiving end of those questions, just having that question asked makes a world of difference, right? If somebody suddenly asks you, have you ever thought about suicide? I guarantee you asking that is not going to make them think about it for the first time, like Jeannie said. But you asking it, it could be the first time they feel like they have permission to tell somebody, yeah, I have. And worst case scenario, you're totally off base and they say, no, why would you ask me that? And you say, okay, well, I was just worried about you. I wanted to make sure, you know? So just, I mean, and I think that's the piece that we hope events like this will help us all with, is getting us comfortable. That word, some of it can lose some of the power that it has if we are more comfortable talking about it, and it can lose the power it has over people who are considering it when they feel then more comfortable talking about it. So hopefully that answered your question, but if I missed anything, let me know.
Thanks, Jody. Destiny did write in the chat box that she wanted to find out more about becoming a mental health therapist and how would you go about doing this or getting an internship. And again, if somebody wanted to unmute and ask a question, please do. We're just trying to keep your video off just for privacy reasons. So, but you can unmute to ask a question. So again, if someone wants to share a little bit about becoming a mental health therapist and how you would go about that, feel free.
I can share a little bit about that. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. And one thing that is very important if you want to be a mental health therapist is you have to figure out which discipline you want to go into, because there are a vast number of professions that you can go into. We have psychologists, we have licensed professional counselors, we have licensed clinical social workers. And so once you figure out which particular discipline you want to pursue, then you just go forth from that angle. Everyone doesn't always start out with a psychology degree before they go on to graduate school and then maybe further in graduate school. So it just kind of depends on how much schooling you want to do, which particular discipline would serve you in the population you want to work with, whether you want to work with children, if you want to work with a geriatric population, if you want to work at a college counseling center. All of those things can kind of color your experience and what you pursue. And so I would say just start with your graduate program. Start researching graduate programs which seem like they have all the criteria that would serve what you want to do. And then if you do any of the master's counselor education program at Georgia Southern or the PsyD program, you can definitely apply for a practicum. Undergraduate psychology students do their field experience or their internship with us. We have those opportunities here, but other places might have those same things as well. So definitely start with that graduate program that's going to best outline what you plan to do.
Thanks, Nikita. And I will just add, once you get into a program, they will help you research where internships would be appropriate for you, because that's going to take a year or so before you would jump into that. So you would have time to figure out internships after you actually. Social worker, marriage and family therapist, you can do a broad range of types of jobs with any of those. It's just kind of a personal fit for what maybe you would like to do. All right, did anybody else have any other questions that they would like to share or ask?
I just wanted to add to Destiny, if you ever want to pick one of our brains a little bit, we always take that moment to have a consultation. We've had students before, just reach out to ask us a little bit more about what that process looks like. So definitely call one of the counseling centers and set up a time to meet with one of the counselors, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to share with you just kind of what that process looks like.
Hey, Becca, it's Ken. I just really appreciate all of y'all on this panel that have offered this today. And I just appreciate your time and your knowledge. I was curious if there were some life scenarios, whether that be with students or later in life with students as they've gotten out of college. Are there things that life situations that cause more stress or a stronger sense of hopelessness that could lead someone to contemplate suicide more? And I'm asking a question that might make you panic a little bit on creating too broad of a generalization, but I do recognize that some situations don't fit everybody, and that just because someone might be going through a very stressful life scenario, it's not equivalent to someone else in terms of how they handle it or what they think is a solution. But are there some life scenarios that create stronger stress in general, but not for all, that could lead someone to contemplate suicide more, so that if we were to become aware of some of those things that students are going through, it might help us be a little bit more sensitive or touch base a little bit more or check in like one of the recommendations earlier?
I'll dive into that. Yes and no. So I'm going to talk, I have two sisters. I have one sister that is an animal lover. Her animals, she pushes them around in a stroller. She loves her animals. I have another sister who hates animals. They shed, they're too messy. If my sister with a dog, she's got a dog, when she lost a dog, and she had a dog who died suddenly, she was devastated. My other sister could not understand for the life of her what she was so upset about. Individuality to this topic is so important. What is impactful and important to me may not be important to even somebody in my own family. I think about that because when I look at suicide, I think about loss. I think about an undercurrent of hopelessness. Things aren't going to change. I've been impacted in some way by some type of loss. In 2008, when the housing market crashed, suicide rates and things went up because everyday people were impacted by losing their homes. So there are things that are more common to create, these major life stressors. I've lost my home, would certainly impact some people, but not all people. It is so individual as to how somebody responds to that loss. And that's really what we look at. And some of the things that Jody had mentioned early on about warning signs and risk factors all kind of play into that. How many resources do I have available? How comfortable do I feel asking for help? Can I break through that barrier and say, I'm in a bad spot and I'm thinking about suicide and I need more than what's available to me right now. So I think there aren't any specific things. I think it is really, there are certainly major events that play out that can be very impactful, but it really comes down to the individual and how the individual is responding and what they feel is available to them and what they do about the distress they're in. So that's how I think I would answer that question. And I don't know, Jody, you might have something else. It looked like you were going to buzz in. So I'll turn it over.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Jeannie's saying. And also, it would be, well, people are extraordinarily unique, which is what makes people, I think, really exciting to work with. And we're really unpredictable. The one thing that we know from the whole history of psychology is that human beings are terrible at predicting behavior, right? So as much as we know, even those of us that spend all of our time working with human behavior, we're still really bad statistically at predicting behavior. So the best we can do is look at what are some of the factors that are associated with suicide and be mindful when we see large scale events that might hit multiple of those. Getting to your question. The one thing that hasn't come up much tonight is that we're in an environment that is putting a lot of people at a higher risk for suicidal ideation. That does not mean that everybody right now is considering suicide, but the fact that people are right now more isolated, they feel they have less human interaction and less human contact. It is increasing levels of anxiety and depression for folks. And so those things for some people are going to increase their risk of suicidality. For other people, just because they have different lived experience, different internal coping strategies, external coping strategies, you name it, they may not. So it's hard to say if this one thing happens, we need to be worried. It's better to say if we see large scale events happening, we need to check in with the people that we think are involved.
Thanks, Jody. Thanks, Jeannie.
Yes, thank you both. And just real quick, I want to be mindful of time. I know we have another question, but for those of you that may have to leave and we're hoping to get attendance verification, if you need to leave, please do. But if you can stay, we have one more question and then a wrap up. But if you're hoping to get attendance verification, please leave your name and professor's name in the chat box, and we will ensure these professors are notified of your attendance to this event. So again, if you need attendance verification, please put your name and your professor's name in the chat box, and we'll make sure they're notified if you need to leave. If you can stay, we do have one more question that I would like to get to, but I just wanted to be mindful of our time because we are at 7 o'clock. So Lindsay did share that she is thankful for this conversation. It sounds like students have many resources, which is great. Will we be offering and addressing more with faculty and staff to get educated on suicide prevention, not just with students, but coworkers, family, etc.? I don't know if Amanda or Nikita, you want to take that because you're both on the suicide prevention coordinators.
Sure. Definitely, we're super excited about some initiatives that we're working on, developing additional resources just overall for the Georgia Southern community. And one of those is making sure that every single faculty and staff member is trained in suicide prevention techniques so that they can recognize when students are in distress, so that they can know what to do when those students are in distress, and make sure to connect those students with those appropriate resources. And so we work all the time with faculty and we have a lot of different resources available, and we're working very hard to expand those so that at the end of our goal, we want to have it where anyone who is working with Georgia Southern in any capacity is going to have the knowledge and the resources to help any student who's ever in distress, whether it be with suicidal thoughts or just mental health needs. They're going to know exactly what to do to connect that student to help. And of course, please, anyone else, if you have any more knowledge of different initiatives happening, please share.
Amanda, can you share what Vera is doing in the community? I can't remember the name, but I know there's a prevention and assist training. Can you just share what's going on in the community?
She does. She does a training called Suicide Talk, and it is more of a condensed version and easily trainable to all community members. So, and I was going to add to that, if Lindsay, you do work within a department, we do have QPR requests that you could even bring up as something we can do within the whole department. Like Nikita was saying, we're hoping that all staff and faculty are to be trained in suicide prevention skills as well. We are trying to promote more suicide prevention programming, not just in September, but year round. So we do offer QPR monthly, but we would also love to reach out to each department and offer QPR training. So if that is something you would like within your department, please suggest that. We could always, we have a request form online, and I did add the link that you could request it for your whole department, and we could offer that training. And Jeannie just did add, it's called the Savannah Safety Net. And I'll let you add if you want to, Jeannie, about that organization.
And I'll just add, as Amanda was saying earlier, if you have more questions or need a little bit more detail about what we're talking about, then all of our information is on our website as well. So you can reach out to us. We're happy to consult and talk you through any experience that you have and any kind of training or education or any questions that you might have about any of the services that we're providing.
might add, I don't know if Kira, you're still on this and actively listening, but Kira Moulton is the president of Active Minds chapter. And Kira, are you there? Do you want to give a shout out and plug Active Minds as a student organization?
Yeah, sure. So Active Minds is a student organization led by students where we talk about issues related to mental health and suicide for young adults. So we mostly just try to keep the conversation open, have it something that's openly discussed without stigma, and make it more available as far as giving resources to students about where to go on campus, just because they may feel more comfortable talking with a student compared to a professional about it. And we're a pretty large chapter over the nation. We have a lot of different chapters in the United States where we just try to promote mental health awareness and suicide prevention.
Thanks, Kara. Active Minds is amazing. And actually, they did a great report on how COVID-19 was affecting college students back in April, and they're redoing that study again this fall just to compare results. So they really are staying on top of how our current situation, our current life around us is impacting college mental health. And so they're a great organization if you are interested. In closing, I really just want to thank everyone that has attended, including students, staff, and faculty. We hope this conversation will encourage us to reach out to those that are in need and help to offer support and resources. If you or anyone you know may be dealing with suicidal thoughts, please know that help is available. You are not alone. Please reach out for help and support. And if any of the panelists want to give any closing statements or comments, that would be great. If not, I will just put a reminder out there that suicide prevention programs on campus, we offer QPR training monthly. It's open to all students, staff, and faculty, and check our website for those dates and information. So does anybody have any other closing statements they would like to share before we end?
I would just share, go ahead and check out the Student Wellness and Health Promotion website as well, and follow us on social media, especially if you appreciated some of those self-care tips. We work with the Counseling Center very closely, more on the primary prevention side. So if you're interested in that, we also have a student organization, the Wellness Ambassadors, on both Statesboro and Armstrong campus that we would love you to be a part of. So I will drop our website in the chat, as well as my email, and feel free to contact me at any time.
And join Gemma for mindful yoga at Mondays, right?
Wednesdays at 4.
Wednesdays at 4. Or Wednesdays, not Monday. I just want to say thank you all for coming out. It's just, even a small crowd is a crowd, and we appreciate you and you know, for taking the time to be with us, and to being committed to being part of the prevention of suicide. And I hope everybody has a good evening. What's ahead?
Thank you again for everybody. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for everything that you shared. Thank you for everybody who participated. If there are any further questions, please reach out to the Counseling Center. Any of us would be happy to help.
Have a great night. Thanks.